This past summer I did an internship in Camden, New Jersey, and that was kind of the foundation for this presentation. I think, what would you guys say when you have heard of Camden? Have you heard anything about it, or what are your stereotypes, thoughts? You can just shout them out. Crime, danger. Violence. Anything else? Decrepit. All right. Well, here's some statistics just in general that I want to show you about Camden. Some of the things that you might, in general, be more familiar with. The city of Camden, not including Camden County, is 9 square miles. It has 100,000 or more people in the population, including the undocumented immigrants. So as you can see, probably about a fifth of the people there are undocumented immigrants. There are 3 high schools, 3 supermarkets, and 2 prisons. They just closed one of them, and 3 hospitals. And 75% of the city's $110 million budget comes from the state and federal government. A few years ago, the state of New Jersey actually took over the city of Camden because Camden was really going through a lot of challenges and needed some intervention in that. As far as demographics, it's about half and half male and female. As you can see, 53% African American and 39% Latino, so pretty high mixed race population. About half of the population is under 25 years old, and over 1 in 4 people do not speak English as their first language or at home. 13,000 are also on disability. In terms of education, only about just over half of Camden residents have a high school degree or higher, which is crazy to think that, comparing that to Villanova, I think everyone here has a high school degree. The average wage of someone without a high school education is about $11,000 a year. And to compare that, the line of poverty in the United States is about $19,000 a year. So statistically, in the United States, if you're living on less than $19,000 a year, you're living in poverty. In Camden, only about 5% of the population has a college degree or higher, and about half of the population in Camden cannot read. In terms of housing, 1 out of every 40 homes is abandoned, which is actually doing much better than they have been doing in the past. And about 11% of the properties themselves are abandoned as well. The property value decreases by $5,000 for each abandoned house, which means if you're on, if there's like a strip of houses in a row, and the house on the end is abandoned, and you live on the other end of the street, your house is going to cost less if you wanted to resell it, because there's an abandoned house on that street. And abandoned houses are usually great breeding places for drugs and crime and violence. I looked up some statistics for housing units, or from housing in Camden City or Camden County, as opposed to the entire state of New Jersey. And as you can see, there are some stark differences. The number of housing units in 2000 in Camden is about 30,000, whereas in New Jersey there are over 3 million houses. The homeownership rate is 46% in Camden, as opposed to 66% in the entire state of New Jersey. And the median value of a house where people are actually living in it is about $41,000, whereas in the state of New Jersey, the median is about $170,000. One of the, as you can see, like, abandoned houses play a lot into the issue of housing, and that's probably because there's not a single homeless shelter in the city of Camden. So if someone doesn't have a place to live, they can, basically their choices are to either sleep on the streets or go into the houses and sleep there. But obviously that's dangerous, because some of the drug leaders have taken over certain houses, and or can take it over after people go there. So the housing situation is pretty tough right now. In terms of employment in general, some of you might know that Campbell's Soup Company is just about the only big company that is still in Camden. They have their headquarters there. Before a very pivotal point in Camden's history, which was some riots in the early 1970s or so. There used to be a whole bunch of companies there. There was the RCA, like the electronics company, and of course Campbell's was there at the time, and there was a shipbuilding company there as well. But now Campbell's is the only company that's really stuck around. Camden is the second poorest city in the United States, which is ironic because New Jersey is actually the wealthiest state in the U.S. Something else I noticed when I was working in Camden, I worked only in the city, but the entire city of Camden is poor. It's not like, oh, you go like this neighborhood and like, it's like, this is a bad neighborhood and this is a good neighborhood. The entire city is poor. There is no diversity in that respect. The median income of a family of 4 in Camden is about $23,000, which is pretty low considering that the national poverty level, again, is $19,000. And the unemployment rate is about 10.7%, which is twice the unemployment rate for the entire state. As you can see, jobs are decreasing and travel time to work is pretty high, and the per capita income is about $12,000. So the employment situation is not great there. In terms of drugs and crime, 42% of the population of Camden can be described as addicted or recovering from a chemical addiction. So that would be probably like this section of the room, if this was the city of Camden, would have some sort of drug or chemical addiction. There are 200 active drug corners and 3,000 drug dealers in the city. So usually one of these drug corners will be centered around an abandoned house, and they'll have someone on a bike that just circles the area to watch what's going on, and they'll have someone on one corner that has the drugs, and then someone on the other corner they'll receive the money. And most of the people that actually come and buy drugs from Camden are out of state. So when I was there, there were a few times where I actually saw some of these things happening, and it was every single time was an out-of-state license plate. So that's really frustrating because Camden is, again, just characterized, like you guys said, as drugs, violence, crime. It's like the stereotypical Camden reputation right now. 1 in every 8 houses reports cases of domestic violence, and there was actually an incident when I was there over the summer where there was domestic violence at like 4 p.m. right on the street, and there was a priest who was kind of watching, like kind of saw it happen, but he knew the couple, and it was a pretty dangerous situation, so he said it's probably better just not to intervene at this point. And because of all these wonderful statistics that you've been hearing, Camden is the 5th dangerous city as of 2007. In terms of religion, I focus mostly on the Catholic religion because most people in Camden, if they are into their religion, are Catholic. There are 125 parishes in the Camden Diocese, and there are about 500,000 people in the Camden Diocese, which includes Camden City and the surrounding areas like Camden County. There have been 343,000 people assisted at the Catholic Hospital, and there are about 800 students right now in Catholic school. So all the statistics sound pretty depressing, right? Pretty tough, pretty stereotypical, what you would expect of Camden, right? I mean, it's a tough place to live. But now I want to give you some facts about what actually I saw in Camden and what I actually learned. And I think the main message of that is the hope that's there and the people that are working to make Camden a better place. And the first place I'd like to talk about is Cathedral Kitchen, which is pictured right here. It's kind of close to the waterfront, so if you have ever been to like the Susquehanna Bank Center there, the aquarium, it's like just down the street, and it's one of the only places in Camden where people can go to get a free meal. And people come from all over Camden. If you remember seeing the map at the beginning of my slide, the waterfront is right on the edge of Camden, obviously right near the bridge to Philadelphia, and people come from all the neighboring counties to this place to get food. And they're served with dignity. They come in and they sit down and they have a hot meal and they have bread that they can take home and other desserts and drinks and things. So it's really a great place. And it's an entirely eco-friendly building that will pay back for itself in the cost that it saved by being environmentally friendly in, I believe, 6 months after the building was put up. So that's definitely great. And it was also founded by a graduate of St. Joe's Prep who started it when he was 19. And it's called Cathedral Kitchen because it was originally run out of the basement of the cathedral. So it's really to show a way that one person can make a difference. And down the street from Cathedral Kitchen is CamCare, which is a healthcare center for the uninsured. And it is true that the lines are longer there because it's mostly for people who are uninsured, and as you saw, there's a large undocumented immigrant population. But CamCare serves a lot of people every day and really does a great job of providing that service. They have a couple different branches in Camden, in the city itself. And Lourdes Hospital is also really reaching out to the large Hispanic community in Camden. A lot of Hispanics have a special place in their heart for Mary and for Lourdes, and that's definitely a good thing as well. Another great sign of hope in general is the Waterfront. How many of you have ever been to the Waterfront for a concert or whatever? A lot of the Waterfront, the condos, the aquarium there, it's all great places to bring business into Camden. Now, unfortunately, right now there aren't taxes on any of these establishments, so when we go to the concerts at Susquehanna Bank, there is no tax being given directly to the city of Camden. That's something that a lobbying group that I'll talk about in a little bit is working to try and claim. But either way, they've really tried hard to make at least the Waterfront area a good place to live, to bring some business right into Camden. In terms of demographics, some hope there. Little Mexico is definitely one of the most popular places to dine. And I put up a picture of San Lucas, which is like my favorite Mexican restaurant there, or the only Mexican restaurant I've been to there. But but it definitely is the hot spot to go. And there are a lot of really great restaurants to eat right in this section of Little Mexico, which is in a pretty nice area. They also closed the Riverfront Prison, which was that third prison that was there. In Camden City, there used to be a state prison, a federal prison, and a local prison. So whatever people in prison would come to Camden City might not necessarily be from Camden City. They might not even be from New Jersey. But it really created a stigma for the city of Camden. Oh, well, that's where all the criminals go. A lot of times, too, their families would relocate there, and there would be issues with the stigma of having a child or a relative of someone in prison at one of the school systems or working in the area. So we're really happy that Riverfront Prison was just closed. So that can hopefully decrease that stigma. In terms of the pollution, I didn't speak about this earlier, but one of the struggles, Camden has one large sewer plant, and usually there are about 5 smaller ones on average in a city this size. But instead they decided to make one really large sewer plant to put all the sewage waste together. Well, unfortunately, that means that there's a really high proportion of pollution in South Camden, to the point where there are health concerns for a lot of the people who are living there. But right now, this organization is called CCOP, Camden Churches Organized for the People. They're a huge advocacy group in Camden City that are trying to advocate for a whole bunch of things, and they've had great success with some so far, which I'll touch on. But right now, they're really trying to break apart this sewer plant and to have a whole bunch of little sewer plants so the pollution isn't concentrated as highly in South Camden. And right now, they did get success in at least offering a discount for some like environmental services to the people of South Camden. In addition, Environmental Hope, it comes from the heart of Camden, which is a Christian community, like a nonprofit organization, which is focused on environmental justice. They do a lot with like community gardens and educating the people in the neighborhood, things to really make sure that the people in South Camden are doing what they can to avoid the effects of the pollution. In terms of housing, one of my favorite stories is the Ugly House contest, which is absolutely hilarious because the people of Kramer Hill decide, all right, well, we're pretty fed up with the fact that there are all these abandoned houses. So they decided to have a contest, and to really publicize it in the media and to say, okay, find the ugliest house that you can. And so all these people took all these pictures of abandoned houses and were able to submit it to the local newspapers and television stations and radio stations, and they finally were able to find the abandoned house. That was like the ugliest house. And at first, I didn't really understand what the point of this was. Like, okay, you took a picture of it, like, great, what are you going to do now? But I think a lot of that is getting, like, the media to say, okay, like, there are a really high number of abandoned houses in this neighborhood. Like, what can we do about that? How can we fix that? And Kramer Hill is definitely in one of the nicer areas of Camden, so to say that there are a lot of abandoned houses was definitely a wake-up call for the local community. St. Joe's Carpenters Society is another one of the great nonprofits that is giving hope to housing in Camden. It is actually run right now by a Villanova graduate, which is awesome, and it rebuilds houses in Camden. It's done about 500 to 700 so far in the past few years. And they also have, instead of having volunteers come and work, they have professionals come and like build these houses and refurnish them. And the professionals also teach money management, credit tips, the process of buying, what to do when you sign a lease, things like that. So it really helps to give people the right resources to living in a house and the right finances. This is also one of probably the greatest examples of hope of housing, and it's called Baldwin's Run. It's a community in East Camden, which is again one of the nicer parts, but this community before it was redone, it was so dangerous that no one could enter. The police couldn't enter, the ambulance couldn't enter. If someone had a conflict, or if they were trying to catch a criminal in there, or if someone got hurt, they would have to bring them outside of the community because the police wouldn't even enter. It was that dangerous to go in. So a few years ago, I believe it was 2001, there was a grant called the Hope 6 grant, and it was $6 million, and it was given, portions of it were given to any nonprofit that said that they had a good use for it. And Baldwin's Run was able to be a recipient of that funding, and they were able to completely redo the neighborhood. So St. Joe's Carpenters Society, which we just talked about, has now created into one of the top 10 cottage communities to live in the United States. And it is absolutely exquisite. You would think, I mean, it looked like a neighborhood on the main line. And there are signs on some of the houses that say FR for rent, or those signs don't exist, and those are houses that people can actually buy and live in. And creating that alternating sequence between houses for rent and for sale creates more of a stable neighborhood community, creates people who want to live there and who keep the neighborhood going. In addition, it's pretty cheap, as you can tell, to live there, $70,000 to $150,000, a sliding scale based on your income. And they also avoid gentrification. Does anyone know what gentrification is? I'd like to explain. I can explain it. It's when gentrification occurs when, say, a house is bought by a realtor, and the realtor fixes it up and turns around and sells it right away, and sells it for more than it was originally on the market for. Then, if the community was originally intended to be a community for like people who might not have had a high income, when the realtor resells it, those people aren't able to purchase it. They don't have the money to purchase it. So it kind of defeats the purpose of this original community. And in Baldwin's Run, you have to keep your house for like at least 10 years, usually like 10 to 15, and you can't resell it for more than, I think, like 10% of what you bought for. So it really creates a pretty stable like neighborhood system where the poor are able to live in a pretty nice area now. In terms of education, I spoke a little bit earlier about Camden High, which is one of the public schools in Camden City. And Camden High is probably one of your typical public schools in Camden. There's one other public school, high school as well. And in these schools there are race tensions, segregated lunches, almost everyone's on food stamps, and the average student is about 3 grade levels behind at best. Fortunately, there are some Catholic schools that are right nearby that students from Camden City can attend, and a lot of those Catholic high schools offer scholarship programs or special incentives for students from Camden City to enter. And they're in Cherry Hill, which is pretty close by to Camden City, so definitely feasible. And one other sign of hope in the education system is St. Joe's Pro Cathedral, which is has an elementary school. And again, this is just one example. There are many, many schools that are doing great things. But this school had all of the 2004 graduates of the elementary school, which it was a K-8 school, so I guess it would be technically a grade school. Every single one of those students graduated high school. And I believe it was like 96% of them went on to college after college or a 2-year junior college program. There's also an educational program down the street from this school called Urban Promise, which kind of helps to keep children in school and teach them good study habits and keeps them out of trouble, really focuses on education as a priority. And as you can see, 99% of the participants in Urban Challenge go to college. Employment is a little bit shaky right now, at least with one of the examples I saw, which this is the river right near that sewer plant, the really big sewer plant. So obviously there's some potential or occurrence of pollutants in the river. But for a while, no one was allowed to fish in the river. No one was allowed to do anything related to the river. But Father Doyle, one of the priests in South Camden, got permission for people to fish on the river. When he explained it to us, he was like, well, it might be toxic, but like people eat it anyway, and they live. And I was like, okay. But I do think it's showing a sign of hope that these people are, able to fish, first of all, as a hobby. They're allowed to fish and can stay out of trouble in other ways. And they're also able to, it's not a great situation, but the problem of the toxins in the river hasn't been such a great problem that it's like affected the people severely negatively more than it was before. So we're hoping that things can get better with that soon. In South Camden, there are a lot of community gardens and greenhouses as well. So a lot of times for children, they'll go and just hang out in the community garden and plant vegetables and flowers and whatever, and then they can take home some of the food and the seeds after they work there to give themselves just a little bit of food to supplement whatever their parents might be bringing home. In terms of drugs and crime, I talked about Camden Churches Organized for the People, that advocacy group, and they discovered in the year 2006 that there was no head police chief in Camden. So again, we talked about one of the most dangerous cities in the country, and there's no head police chief. Well, duh, it's going to be dangerous then. So they gathered the district attorney and had a meeting, and over 800 people showed up for this meeting to say, we want a head police chief here. So the district attorney got a head police chief a couple weeks later, and almost immediately the crime rates dropped. They're still high, but they have a really solid police system, which is at least making crime rates fall. Another project that CCOP participated in was when there was an abandoned house right next to one of the elementary schools in Kramer Hill. And parents were really worried about their children going to school because there were so many incidences of rape and crime and drug situations there. So CCOP was able to petition the right legislators to remove that fence and clear out the brush, and at least make a visible space between that abandoned house and the elementary school so that parents could at least watch their kids walk to school. Now again, the ideal situation would be for this abandoned house to be completely removed or completely redone, have someone living there. And that's what CCOP is working on right now. Down the street from that, there was an old police station, which was causing a lot of crime as well, and a lot of drug sets were focused around there. But the CCOP was able to, again, talk to the right people and demolish this police station and make it into a community garden. In terms of religion, about 75 to 80% of the people attend the religious service on a weekly basis, which is, I would be willing to say, probably higher than at Villanova, which is a Catholic school. And when I was driving around South Camden, which is by far the absolute worst place in Camden, I mean, you could see there were abandoned houses everywhere. There was trash and litter all over the streets. There were, it just isn't maintained well, and it isn't clean. And I think a lot of the churches, like just driving down that main street, you could see like a church like every block, and it was churches of all different denominations. So there was like a Baptist church, a Presbyterian church, a Catholic church. There was a Buddhist temple. There was a synagogue. There were all different religious buildings there, and it really showed a lot how the people aren't focused on their material possessions, and they aren't focused on what's like normal to do. They know that they don't have a lot and that they're going through a lot of struggles, but they're really relying on God to, or on their religion and faith in general, to bring them through those tough situations. So, as a conclusion, what can we learn from this? First of all, I think media perceptions are really deceiving a lot of the times. Have any of you seen the 2020 episode on Camden? Diane Sawyer did this episode a couple years ago, and she went in, she focused on, I believe it was 3 children, and one was dropping out of school because he had to work because his family didn't have money, and one was a little girl who was trying to go to school and couldn't stay in school, and another was a family who was living in a house that was completely run down. And it was good because it gave a lot of awareness to the city of Camden and the things the potential that it has there. But at the same time, it really made Camden this, like, I don't know, this place without hope. And I think it's very telling that after that episode showed, donations kept pouring in from all over the country, and everyone said, I want to send that little girl to school, and I want that boy to go to college, and I want that family to have a house. And they actually, as far as the family and the house, they actually wrote to Extreme Home Makeover. So many people wrote to Extreme Home Makeover and said, we want this family to have a house. We want them to be your next Extreme Home Makeover. And it worked. And they got this huge redone house, which is right down the street from where I interned. And it was just absolutely beautiful and a really great place for them to live. And I think the fact that that boy is still in school and that little girl was able to give it a chance to get back to school, and the family was able to get a house, really shows how the media perceptions aren't always right. You know, and the media is saying, okay, let me take these 3 stories and show you how bad Camden is. But with just a little bit of help from an outside friend, all those 3 stories were completely turned the other way around. Which leads me to my next point. I think a lot of nonprofits are doing really great things in Camden. They're really showing a lot of hope with the affordable housing and the education system, the drugs, the prisons, and there are a lot of volunteers who come to Camden to improve the place and to continue on the path that it's on right now. I think one great place is New Visions Community Center, which is run by Kevin Moran, and it's the only place in Camden where you can get a shower for free. So if people are homeless, that's where they go, and they get a shower there, and they can get a change of clothes and toiletries, food. They can get everything there. I think they also have like legal help and assistance with like finding a job and things like that. So it's really doing great things for the people in that community. Monsignor Bob Mcdermott is a prime example of the starfish story that I think a lot of us have heard, where, you know, the man is walking along the beach and he's throwing, you know, 1 starfish in the ocean at a time, and someone comes up to him and says, oh, well, like, you're not making a difference. Like, you have so many starfish that you have to throw back in. They throw another starfish in the ocean and say, it made a difference for that one. And I think Monsignor Bob Mcdermott did that in Camden. He actually grew up in Camden City and experienced a lot of these challenges himself, but he was able to, now he is the pastor at St. Joe's Pro Cathedral, which is where I was talking about the elementary school, and he has really made a difference in the education system for that community. But I think my most important point I want to stress is that there are thousands of Camdens in the world, and you can easily stereotype a city, a county, a country, a state, anywhere in the world to say, oh, they're just, they're whatever. It's just a bad place. Like, I don't want to help there. I don't want to make a difference there. It's just Camden, it's dangerous. I can't do anything. But I think all of the people that I met this summer really proved that there can be a difference made. And there really is a way to make some sort of change quite easily. We just have to believe in the hope of the people. So, that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
I was just wondering about, like, in the end when you were talking about media perceptions, I was wondering how, like, I'm sure that media perception, or like when media will target an area that's like especially bad, what does it, I know that there's also some negative side effects then, that like people will not want to live in that area, and it'll like attract more like drug lords, or it'll attract like more, people will want to leave instead of like want to go there. And so do you think, I just wanted to know what else you think about media perceptions of this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely important that the media does focus on the areas that are struggling, because like in the example we saw with 2020, it's quite possible to do a lot of really great change because of the attention that the media has given to the situation. And I think Haiti is a great example of that, how Haiti was, in my opinion, probably one of the Camdens of the world before this earthquake hit. And it, with all the media attention and all the people who have donated, I think there's hope that it'll become even better than it was before. I think the important thing with the media is that it's not just always focusing on the negative. And it's hard to say that because the negative is like the catchy thing to focus on. It's like, oh yeah, let me help Camden. Like, I'm going to be a good person. I'm going to donate my money, or I'm going to donate my time. But I think it is important that, for example, that after all the money came in and the extreme home makeover happened for this community that Diane Sawyer featured, she did another, a follow-up segment. And I would be willing to bet that most people who saw the first one probably might not have seen the second one, but the important point is that she did it, and that's our responsibility if we're watching things like this, to follow up on what's been happening in the community since that. I do think a lot of times media is good because it's a way to really get a point across and spread a message really quickly, but at the same time it's really tough. I think there needs to be a balance between what's realistic and what's the news, what's catchy. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah.
What did you do as an intern there?
The Romero Center is a service and social justice retreat center, so it sends groups there. There's actually a group of Villanova students who went, which is great. And I was able to, I did a lot of things. They had a lot of need, I think, and a lot of flexibility, and they were, so I was able to work in facilitating discussions about Camden. I actually was able to give a bunch of tours. So for the SLC students who also came later on a tour to Camden, I was able to give one of the tours around the city to show all these things that I just kind of told you about. I was able to, they do a lot with incorporating service, social justice, and your faith together. So I talked a lot about my experiences here doing service and learning about social justice. The Romero Center is named after Oscar Romero, who said, "We must be a voice for the voiceless." So we did a lot on talking about Oscar Romero and his legacy and what it means to live his legacy in a modern day world. So.
Was the Riverfront Prison a local, state, or federal one that was closed out?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think it was the state. I'm almost positive. I don't think it was the local one. But, yeah.
In your estimation, what big things still need to happen in Camden? And along with that, what are some of your specific hopes for the city?
Ooh, good questions. big things that need to happen for Camden. I think the Susquehanna Bank Center needs to not be tax exempt. And that really frustrates me that all those concerts that come in and out of there, we're not helping that city at all. And I think even if people don't travel past the Susquehanna Bank Center when they go, I think that there needs to be some sort of money funneled to the city, because that would be a great space of revenue. I think that sewer plant needs to be closed down. That actually is the source of all the sewage from Camden City and all 40 sections of Camden County. So that's really doing bad things for the health of the people in the area. And I also think people just need to, on a more local or personal level, I think people really need to remember that there is hope in the city and there's potential that can be made. What was the second part of your question?
Just what some of your hopes for the city are?
I hope in the future that I hope the places like Villanova continue to go to the Romero Center and other places to do service in Camden. I know Martin Luther King Jr. Day Committee has arranged service sites in Camden in the past, because I think Camden's really special. The first time I ever went to Camden actually was through Villanova on Martin Luther King Day. I think it was last year, 2 years ago. And I remember talking to this guy, and he was telling me all these stories and about his life, and he's like, oh, everyone knows about this, oh, everyone knows. And I was like, I don't understand, you live in Camden City, it's a city, I'm imagining Philadelphia. And he's like, yes, this is an urban setting, but Camden's a small town. And for the stories he was using, he was relating it to the fact that everyone knows everything, and everyone knows everything about each other. But I think that Camden also has kind of a small town charm to it in a way that, people know what else is going on in the different neighborhoods. It's really not that big. And I think people can really rally together to bring change about. I'd love to see the education system change in Camden. And I really believe that it will, because I think it's on a good path. But I think if people focus on the idea of community and the idea of bringing together as a community to really make a change, then that's how they can, that's how Camden can continue to progress. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you.